Well, it's another day of heat, humidity, scattered thunderstorms, and guess what? That's what we have to look forward to for the next several days. So we'll take a look at what's going on, let you know if and when this will ever break. And of course, we will take a look at the tropics because there's a tropical wave out there. And that's all coming up tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast, which is brought to you by Tempest by WeatherFlow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system. Join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. The link is on the descriptor to this podcast. Use the coupon code.
Oh, sorry, that's my cue, right? Summer 20, summer 2024. I'm sorry.
That's all right. And if you use that coupon code, you will get.
You'll get 10 big percent off.
And a big hello to everybody on the chat board tonight. And welcome to those of you lurking in the background on the Joe and Joe Weather Show, as so many of you do. Just remember that we're on Sunday through Thursday at 7:35 p.m. and the occasional Friday and Saturday if there's a storm around. And if there is, we'll give you plenty of notice that we're adding an extra show or two. Make sure you like the show. I mean, make sure, well, no, we like you to like the show, but make sure you hit the like button if you like the show and turn your notifications on so you don't miss us. Oh, I had
Well,
to
it was,
drive. I had to
was
drive an
it?
hour and 45 minutes each way to get measured for a new suit and uh, at Men's Warehouse. And thankfully, Joe, the Lord in His infinite wisdom just smiled upon me because the Men's Warehouse was literally right off the exit from the highway. So when I was done there, the next thing I wanted to do was go to Costco because I never get the opportunity to go to Costco. You know, the closest one is an hour and 45-minute drive. Well, the Costco is a quarter of a mile up the road from the Men's Warehouse. So I was able to kill two birds with one stone. I came home with, and I went in for two things and I spent $260. I even forgot what the two grocery items. I wound up spending, by the time I was done, I wound up spending $260. But that's what makes Costco so much fun.
Well, you're going to be, you dealt with Men's Warehouse today. I'll be dealing with Men's Warehouse tomorrow for my tuxedo because of a similar situation. My daughter's getting married before yours in September, but and these days you don't even have to go to Men's Warehouse. Believe it or not, Joe. You just send them your measurements, and presumably they look at it and they make up the whatever you
Right.
want with it.
You
They'll
could
send it.
you could use your phone to take let's call them your dimensions.
Yes, exactly.
By the way, no, Tom Contino did not come home with a gallon of mayonnaise, but they had leg of lamb on sale for 4.99 a pound, and I'm a sucker for a leg of lamb, and they were nice size leg of lamb. So I picked that up. I got one of those. I got some coho salmon. I picked up a cooked roasted chicken so that I could have something to eat when I got home because I didn't feel like cooking. And then a few other, oh, and cherries. They had cherries, 2 pound box for like $6. So I bought two boxes. I already ate half of one of them. But I want to just point out, because Tom last night asked me, why do I have to buy a suit when, we worked on television and we should have a closet filled with suits. And I didn't think about this last night, but then I remembered this morning on the drive to get my new suit was the fact that when FiOS shut down, I don't know, I had about 5 or 6 suits and a couple of older ones.
Right.
There is a charity, and they actually had an office right near where I live. But there's a charity that um, takes donated men's suits and dry cleans them, and then they give them to men who are looking for, who might be looking for a job, but they can't afford to buy a nice suit of clothes. So I thought that that was something worth mentioning. If you've got old suits, call your local unemployment office and ask them if if they're hooked up. I forgot the name of the charity. I saw it on CNBC years ago, which is what gave me the idea. But there's a charity group out there that will take men's suits, and they will then give them to men who are looking for jobs, but are unfortunately in financial straits and they can't afford some good clothes. So there's an idea for you.
Yes, well, that certainly would be a nice, otherwise you can, go to the Goodwill bin. I know that there are bins all over the tri-state area for
and,
Goodwill.
and fish through it. So maybe I should have done that to get my suit. Yes, that's a great idea. Well,
Anyway,
this one is
the highlight of
because.
my day, and I already told you this off air, was my wife and my daughter insisted that we go to the Ulster County Country Fair in Ulster County, not far from New Paltz, New York, and we went, and it was a very warm and humid day. Really drains you this type of weather, and
Oh,
we
it
had a couple.
sucks. The phrase you're looking for is that it sucks the life out of you.
Indeed, indeed.
It
And so
does.
what we ended up doing is we ended up going to this fair. The highlight of my experience at this fair was the pig race. They actually had races with pigs going around a track, and in fact, there was actually a couple of races where the pigs go around the track and then they jump into a big vat or a big trough of water. So
Nice.
so that
Well,
was
do
here
they?
I am here I am sweltering in the heat and humidity, and I'm watching a bunch of pigs jump into and having a nice little cool time in a trough of water. So
Well, do they have a? Is there like a pig racing form that you could look at so that you maybe could pick a few winners and bet
well, they
on some
actually gave
triples and exactas?
the guy who was in charge of putting the races together would pick, mostly kids out of the audience. All right, who wants number one? Who wants number two? Who wants and he would give them, the one who came in first, he'd give them like a little badge or something, and the kid would like, oh, look at this, so
And
anyway.
the side bookies are over there laying 8 to 5 on
Yeah.
the favorite. And you kid me about living in Pixley.
Yep. Well, that's the way these fairs are. Next month it's going to be the Dutchess County Fair, which is even bigger than the one that we went to today. But still, there's a lot of if there's one thing about these fairs, is a lot of great food. I mean, pretzels,
Oh yeah,
souvlaki, cheesesteak sandwiches, anything that you'd want, you know, you can get. And so
and,
I didn't
and
pig out exactly, but I mean, I did have some good stuff to eat this afternoon. So
well, good. Speaking of sucking the life out of you, we're doing exactly that in the East, and actually, much of the country is dealing with heat in one form or another. We've got heat advisories up now from New York City, Western Long Island, much of New Jersey southward into the Carolinas. We've got areas of excessive heat warnings in the lower and middle Mississippi Valley and the Missouri River Valley. A lot of heat advisories that go back through Texas and also across the Gulf states. Not quite to me, but close to me. They have heat advisories up for the counties to my south. And up in the Northwest now, we're seeing heat advisories and excessive heat warnings. We've got a severe thunderstorm watch tonight up across Minnesota into northeastern South Dakota. We also have a part of a severe thunderstorm watch in western Kentucky. Oh, and by the way, I got to see if I can find it. Great shot of what looked like a tornado about, I don't know, 15 miles from my house.
you sent that to me, and
Uh, I sent it to you.
eye
Yeah.
opener.
Let's see if I could find, yeah, you've got it on Messenger. I mean, that was pretty darn impressive. I didn't hear anything today about whether it caused any damage or anything. Um, so anyway, Flood watches up for central and northern Vermont, central and northern New Hampshire. There's a couple of working flash flood warnings up there. We've also got flood watches in eastern Tennessee and in western, actually not into, there might be one county in western North Carolina, southwestern North Carolina that's under a flash flood watch. And, that's pretty much going to be the story until we can get a decent dry air mass to come on down, but that doesn't seem to be happening. And in the meantime, tonight we've got there's some thunderstorm activity, and today most of it, not all of it, but most of it actually is from the northern parts of the Hudson Valley northward. That's where you see the lightning strikes, and also up into central and northern New England. There's not a whole lot when you go south. There's a couple of cells that rolled across New Jersey and in parts of eastern Maryland. You're seeing some lightning strikes there, but thunderstorm activity today is just a bit less. And we've got some big storms in central and south Georgia moving southward. And there's another complex that's crossing through Kentucky, and looks like that might be headed into it's moving southeastward. I don't know if I'm going to get into that or not, maybe during the overnight. Um, and then, of course, we've got some big storms up in Minnesota, back into parts of Nebraska. But there's no real break here with respect to humidity. I mean, from what I see.
Do you think maybe I was thinking perhaps Tuesday of next week there might be a bit of a dip in the humidity?
Yeah.
Not a big dip, but I mean enough to make it a little bit or slightly more tolerable.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, but certainly not through the weekend.
No, no, through the weekend, forget about it. It's going to be the same old story.
Right,
I
and I guess the other issue is for next week is, well, I mean, it's right now it's sort of a theoretical issue because we really don't know what we're going to be dealing with. But if you look on the lower right of the satellite loop, you can see that convection is finally forming around this tropical wave that we've been watching for the last couple of days, just sort of moseying along to the west northwest. And I was just kind of looking at some of the models today, which we'll get to in a moment. It offers it has some interesting outcome possibilities when it reaches Florida sometime over the weekend.
Well, I'm particularly interested in this because my daughter, as I mentioned, is getting married on September 1st, and a bunch of her girlfriends are going to be going on a cruise to Bermuda. And I believe the cruise, I'm not exactly sure when. I think it's going to be the 5th or 6th of August and runs for several days. And when I heard when I, it didn't settle into my brain until all of a sudden I said, "Oh my God." And
Yeah, I have to tell you, Joe. I mean, from what I was looking at from yesterday and particularly overnight today, I'm starting to think that um, this is probably going to be a more of a problem for the Eastern Gulf and the southeastern part of the United States, and it might be a problem uh, uh, from the standpoint of heavy rain. I don't know that we're going to have something for the way the European has it. We'll get to all of this in a bit. Um, the European has been trying to make some kind of coastal low, and a low off the east coast of Florida and taking it out to the east. But a lot of the other models have been kind of sort of shifted, like into what the GFS's idea has been, which is to have something go in the Eastern Gulf. And
right.
I'm starting to think, given what the upper air looks like, that this could be one. This could wind up being one of those situations where you get a system that uh, gets into an upper air no man's land as far as the flow is concerned, and winds up sitting there somewhere in the southeast. I mean, that's sort of my early opinion on this.
Well, the GFS is, as you suggested, trying to put this or center this more in the eastern Gulf of Mexico. The European, of course, is trying to put this adjacent to the southeast coastal plain of the United States. And if you take a look at another model, the Canadian, which has it sitting, it pretty much has it sitting close to Savannah, Georgia, for a
Hmm.
number of days, beginning around the 6th or 7th of August, right up until about, well, as far out as it can go, 240 hours on the 10th of August. So we know that there's going to be something down there in the southeast, although a broad swath, anywhere from the eastern Gulf to the southeastern coastal plain. We know that's the case. We just simply don't know exactly where. at this particular moment in time.
Right. Well, let me get that. As we're talking about it, we might as well uh, we'll do it now as far as the tropics are concerned. So here's a look at the tropical Atlantic, and you'll notice that there is been a definite increase in convection in the northern Leeward Islands and on up to Puerto Rico and going into the Atlantic. And there was a low level swirl that we pointed out on the satellite yesterday. I can't seem to find it right now, so it might be gone. But I'm just going to kind of start paying attention to what's going on in the Northeast Caribbean because if you the GFS and the icon also, and actually half the ensemble members of the European are like the GFS. They have two separate clusters. One is on the Atlantic side, and the other one's on the Gulf side. But you know, if the concentration of convection winds up being along or south of the islands, that you could wind up forming some sort of low eventually that tracks across the northern Caribbean or over the islands themselves, and then emerges into the eastern Gulf. But you know, we're talking Wednesday. This is Wednesday, so we're talking sometime over the weekend that would happen. You know, it's something to bear in mind going forward that it's not necessarily going to wind up off the southeast coast and then turning north and northeastward into the Atlantic. This could wind up being um, a problem, and maybe from the standpoint of rain for Florida and for the southeast, from what I saw today.
Well, we'll see. Again, anything beyond 5 days, and especially when you're dealing with the tropics, which can be very amorphous. Um, I just took a look at the icon model, and the icon is siding more with the European. If anything, it's taking the storm more out to sea, east of the outer banks of North Carolina by about the 9th or 10th of August. So
Which one, the 12Z or the 18Z?
this is the 12Z.
Yeah, because the 18Z looks like the GFS.
Yeah.
So,
So you see that
no, I mean
it's
there's a lot to resolve here. I'm not saying that the Atlantic coast models are wrong. I'm just saying that the idea that the GFS has had with trying to take this into the Eastern Gulf seems a bit more plausible today than it was a couple of days ago.
yeah, yeah.
And by the way, the new outlook, they really didn't change very much. They just, you know, just talked about the fact that environmental conditions are supposed to become more conducive after the wave passes the Greater Antilles, and a tropical depression could form this week or early next week over the eastern Gulf of Mexico or far southwestern Atlantic Ocean, including in the vicinity of Florida. So they're kind of looking at the same thing here that we are with regards to you know, where this could ultimately wind up and where we could wind up seeing some sort of closed circulation developing. So we'll just we'll put that to bed and come back to it tomorrow. In the meantime, we've got some showers and thunderstorms, Joe, and there's some flash flood warnings up in northern New Hampshire. Thought I'd point that out. One in northern New Hampshire, the other one in northeast Vermont, and there's some heavy downpours in central Massachusetts and central and northeastern Connecticut. There's something going on just to your northwest. You might have, you might have a downpour there by your house very soon.
We've had the downpour.
Okay,
In fact, we wanted to take the dog out minutes before. We figured, well, let's get him out now before it starts coming down. And literally, as Renato was putting the leash on him, bang, down came the rain, and it was really pouring down rain as of 10 or 15 minutes ago. It may have let
right.
up now, but
Yeah,
yeah.
I see. I just refreshed the radar. It was 20 minutes behind. And, you know, yeah, it's most now it's more east of you than anything else.
So there you go.
I got a cluster in Chesapeake Bay with some special murine warnings there. And
Urine.
murine,
That's good for the. It means it's good if I look up for my eyes or
exactly, that would right. That would be Visine. This is murine. East Central Kentucky, looking at that little complex that's moving southeastward, looks like that'll get eventually into eastern Tennessee and western North Carolina and western Virginia. The stuff in southern Georgia will crossing into North Florida. We got a parade of flash flood warnings and severe thunderstorm warnings there. In the uh, Midwest, uh, in southwest Iowa, there's a bunch of severe thunderstorm and tornado warnings there. And in north central Kansas, there's a bunch of severe thunderstorm warnings there. And up in Minnesota, Joe, around St. Minneapolis, actually south of Minneapolis, we've got a couple of severe thunderstorm warnings. And in the western part of the state, also a few severe thunderstorm warnings going on. And we've got a little action with some rain and flash flooding in the southwest, especially in Arizona. The Storm Prediction Center has a enhanced and slight to enhanced risk from the southern Appalachians northwest through the Ohio Valley and into the upper Mississippi Valley and parts of the plains from Kansas up into North Dakota and Minnesota. The enhanced risk there, you see it in Iowa, Minnesota, eastern South Dakota, and eastern Nebraska. The marginal risk in the east goes to mostly in western Pennsylvania, western Virginia. That kind of goes straight north south, cuts North Carolina in half, and then gets to the coast around South Carolina. Tomorrow, we're looking at marginal to slight risk from the mid Atlantic states to the Ohio Valley and the lower Great Lakes. And that comes with a 2% tornado risk in the area around the lower Great Lakes, central and northern Illinois, much of Indiana, half of Wisconsin, and eastern Iowa. And then day three, which now puts us from Friday into Saturday, they pushed the marginal risk up almost, but not quite to Sandy Hook in New Jersey, and then just north of Allentown, and then going west across Pennsylvania into northern Ohio, back through Indiana, curls around into it's crossing Tennessee to about me in North Georgia, down to the Carolina coast. And I think we might wind up adding a little bit of a slight risk to this. I also sort of thought that maybe Saturday we might see. I think it's Saturday at the very least. I think we're probably going to wind up seeing a marginal risk being put up for parts of the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic states.
As far as our area, you think?
Yeah, that was just my guess a couple of days ago. I'm gonna stick with it. I don't know if it'll be
If
much
you do
anything beyond
extra,
that.
if you do sheer extrapolation over the 3 day period, you can see how little by little that northern fringe of the northern edge, the northern periphery of the marginal is working its way slowly up in our direction. So you would think that by the time we get to Saturday and Sunday, that we would be encompassed or enveloped by that. But what
Yeah.
else? I mean, this whole summer has been one summer of humidity and um, marginal to slight risk of thunderstorm activity. It seems.
Yeah, and with all this tropical air around, of course, the risk is probably more along the lines of heavy rains. We are seeing a lot of these thunderstorm clusters in other parts of the country. They're dealing with their rounds of severe weather, obviously, but we're seeing an increasing amount of flash flood warnings coming up. Probably more flash flood warnings coming up as opposed to severe thunderstorm warnings, and I think that trend will probably continue into the weekend. We're looking at anywhere from an inch to an inch and a half plus from Maine down to Virginia and North Carolina, and also across into the Ohio Valley and lower lakes. A little bit of a break in South Carolina and Georgia, just a small one, and then it picks up again over Florida. We've got some 2 or 3 inch amounts being shown. Now, this takes us through next Wednesday night. So I would say uh, a lot of this in the southeast, what you're seeing in the southeast and for Florida in particular, is going to highly depend on the evolution of this tropical wave as it moves to the west northwest. And just going back to that, let me just bring up the upper air because um, it's kind of been a battle of this building Atlantic Ridge that's out, the Bermuda High, building back westward, and maybe the better view will be the eastern U.S. view. So. And this is why I was just trying to a little. It's become interesting to me is the fact that in off the southeast coast and back through Florida, you're kind of in what I would refer to as a upper flow no man's land. You're not really under the ridge. You're not really under the ridge that's to the west of it, back in the west that is extending into Louisiana and Mississippi. You're sort of in this gaping hole where the flow is very light. To the north, you've got this upper low and shortwave trough that it's swinging to the east, and this might be the trigger mechanism for the potential for some severe weather when it moves eastward. You know, that's going to try to drop southward, and then it pulls northward. And if you notice, at least how the GFS has it, uh, off the west coast of Florida, there's what would be the tropical system. And as we go through the first days of next week, the jet to the north is too far north to pick it up. So it just gets sort of left here. There's no real push to get it to move northeastward. There's higher pressures to the northwest, there's higher pressures to the east, and it's just kind of in this space. And it's got to wait for either the northern jet to come down or for the ridge to build to the west, which it eventually does, but it takes all week to do it. So this is just kind of a very interesting scenario here because this could be one of those tropical storms. If it doesn't become a hurricane, maybe it only becomes a tropical storm, but this could be, one of those systems that produces mega inches of rain and more than anything else.
Yeah, they could do a lot of damage if you have a system that basically stays put or stays in the same general area for many days with tropical moisture. You could see the rains piling up 5, 10, 15, 20 inches or more. And that, again, could do great damage if you happen to be near or within the circulation. But that disturbance, everybody is watching now for tropical development. It pretty much has just ate through that strong, dusty, dry Saharan air layer that we've been talking about for the past few days. Just went right through that for breakfast, if you will. Now the dry air mass is more or less gone. Convection is firing up. So who knows? Anything can happen
Yeah.
between now and let's say the early to middle part of next week. So that'll be an area from the eastern Gulf to the southeast coastal plain of the United States. That's going to be a place that a lot of people will be looking at and watching to see how things develop and how the models eventually pick up on it and develop in their own right as well.
Brandon Doherty hit Super Chat tonight. Thank you, Brandon. And he asks, do I think the ridge in the Atlantic has become the dominant feature that could lessen the number of hurricanes this season against what everyone is saying? I don't look at it that way. I think the presence of that ridge actually will be a driving force to make things go more west. So it's sort of independent of whether you get a lot of tropical systems or not. I think that's far more dependent on what's going on in the upper air with regards to shear and everything else. But the persistence of that strong Bermuda high would suggest that anything that is out there is going to go west and go west for quite a while. So that's kind of how I'm reading it. And by the way, I got the GFS, just based off this run, and again, look for it to change. And we don't know if this is going to be something that does go in the Eastern Gulf, does it maybe winds up in the Southwest Atlantic. But in this whole idea that maybe you wind up with something that has a lot of trouble getting out of the way, that winds up sitting over a particular area for a long period of time. I mean, you talked about 15 to 20 inches. That's exactly what the GFS has in precip amounts for the Florida Panhandle and southwestern Georgia and even into a small portion of southeast Alabama. So again, nothing written in stone here, obviously. We've got days and we still have to see how this is going to evolve. But if we wind up with a system that's stalling somewhere, you can always say that you heard it first on the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast, which is on Sunday through Thursday at 7:35 p.m. Eastern Time. So backing up, uh, we've got this upper trough that's going through tonight. Most of the showers and storms are really up in New England. There's stuff elsewhere that's going to push into the old lakes in Ohio Valley tomorrow. I kind of thought tomorrow might be the break date. It doesn't look like there's a whole lot going on. There might be an isolated shower or storm tomorrow, but I think we may wind up getting a bit of a break from that. And then Friday, you start to see some storms popping up Friday night in clusters in in Pennsylvania, the Hudson Valley, back in the Ohio Valley, down to West Virginia and Eastern Virginia. And then Saturday, when we have a stronger front that's approaching, GFS is pretty bullish with development here of some showers and storms late in the day, Saturday into Saturday night. And that front's that's gonna be another key here, Joe. That front's gonna get hung up for a while. From New England down along through the southeast. And this is where, you start to try to figure out, okay, is it going to be in the Eastern Gulf or is it going to be on the east side of the frontal boundary off the east coast of Florida? Uh, this is so, with the front there, it does at least indicate that Sunday might be a day where we're going to be dealing with showers and storms again. And then, of course, there's the GFS interpretation of what would be Debbie going into the Florida Panhandle.
And yeah, and like I said, early next week there might be a little bit of a break. And really, when we talk about a real legitimate break in the humidity, that might come our way along about the 9th or 10th of August if you want to look long, long range. But that unfortunately also coincides with a lot of the question marks regarding the situation with that tropical system in the southeast. And so until we were able to clear that up, I really don't know what to
Right.
say, you know,
Well,
whether or not.
if you've got strong ridges on either side, if you've got, this is all probably going to depend a lot on the strength of the two highs, the Bermuda high, and then you've got the high that's going to be in the southwest, and this sort of gaping hole in the middle. If you've got a stronger Atlantic ridge that's trapping this thing into the southeast, to me that says that, there's going to be some kind of east-west frontal boundary. But is it a frontal boundary that gets through, New York City and New Jersey and kind of stalls out somewhere across Northern Virginia and points west, or is it a frontal boundary that's further north and we're still, that the drier air never really gets into the Northeast? It's a legit. The tropical system's going to have a say in this.
Right. And the best thing for us probably would be if the storm took a track along the southeast coastal plain and then went right along the outer periphery of that Bermuda High and out to sea. If that system decides to take a track north from the eastern Gulf of Mexico inland, that's probably going to mean that a lot of that moisture is eventually going to come northward in the form of first cloud cover and then in the form of showery rains all the way up toward us. And that's the last thing that we need is an increase in moisture and an increase in humidity. And so
I know.
again, because of the fact that the models beyond, let's say, 5 days with that particular tropical system that's still up in the air, no pun intended, as to where exactly it's going to go. Yeah, there's an indication there's going to be a nice big high from Canada coming down, but where that eventually comes down is going to be highly dependent upon where that system in the tropics moves up. We'll see.
All right, let's do some Briller Jeopardy, shall we?
Surely.
Okay, we're still doing high temperatures in the month of July, so we will begin with we're going to begin with the sands. Okay, the first sand, Joe, is San Antonio.
And I mean, they're all sands tonight, or?
Well, the first three are.
Oh, okay. San
Well, we
Antonio.
have three sands, a sea, and a wash.
Yeah. How about 91 degrees?
Well, it's an interesting guess, but it's a little shy. However, Miss Fowlerite, Tyler Fienga, and Maggie P. right from the get-go nail it at 95.
So is Miss
I, I
Spallowite too.
oh, I did say Miss Fowlerite.
Oh,
Uh, I must have faded out.
okay.
Right.
Well, good. So we
Okay.
go right off the bat. We got three folks who hit it right on the nose.
Now the second San Joe is San Diego.
Well, San Diego, I would think would be maybe not as high as 95, but I think how about 87?
Well, now this is going to depend on there's San Diego. Is the observation taken near the coast, or is it taken at someplace in San Diego further inland? Because if you've been to California, particularly in coastal California, you get these huge temperature differences over a handful of miles because of the cold Pacific Ocean. So I would say that this is probably not the inland high temperature. So I will give you an opportunity to revise your guess.
How about 82?
That's still way too high.
Oh,
Um, Miss Fowlerite is very close at 76. She's very close, and it's not 77, but Frank R gets it at 75.
wow. Okay.
75. Um, so the next one, the next San is San Francisco.
Well, San Francisco, I think, would be even cooler. Um, I would say, dare I say, in the 60s? How about 69?
Well, you know your heart was in the right place, Joe, uh, to leave it in San Francisco and go in the 60s, but it's a little high. Rich Rothmansky's very close with 67, and everybody else, you guys that are in the 70s, you're a no go. 66, Tyler Fienga gets it. 66. Okay, that takes care of the Sands. Now the
And
sea.
sometimes, and sometimes back in the day when the Giants played at Candlestick Park, they used to play. It was right off of the bay, and at night in
Oh, wait,
July.
I was in San Francisco in 1979, I think it was, or 70, no, 77, in August of 77. And it was cold. It was in the low 50s at night. And
Right, and
the drizzle and the fog came in.
yeah, and so they decided to the San Francisco Giants when they played there. Anyone who came to San Francisco's Candlestick Park for a night game in July and August, when it was as you pointed out, Joe, damp and chilly, would get when they came in through the turnstile a cross. They called it the Croix of San Francisco, Croix of Candlestick. In other words, it marked you that you were brave enough to actually see a baseball game at night in the summertime at Candlestick Park. Tom Contino says, I remember people in parkas and blankets at Candlestick Park. So San Francisco could be a very cool place to be in July and August when it's hot elsewhere. The problem is that if you're in San Francisco, sometimes in October when they have the Santa Ana winds, and a lot of people in San Francisco don't have air conditioning, they probably wish they did just for that because it can get very, very hot on a Santa
Yeah.
Ana
Well,
late.
Anthony's right. In 58, it could be 58 in San Francisco and 105 in Napa Valley, which is not that far away.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
all right. So now we go from the sands to the sea, and that's Seattle.
Um, God, Seattle. How about how about 80?
A little high, but not far off. Not far off. Norm Roberts bangs that out, and so does Frank R. 77. WABC. Or in later years, it was New Jersey 101.5.
Yeah.
Um, and the last one is the Wash, Inkton, DC, Washington, DC.
Well,
Average high for July. That should
I
be easy.
our good friend Norm Dvoskin, who we worked with for many years at News 12 Long Island, said the definition of capital punishment is living in Washington, D.C. in July and August without air conditioning.
Oh,
Um,
it's the thing about Washington in the summertime, and I've been there in the summertime, is that, and this is my issue with New York City, is kind of the same from that standpoint, and Philadelphia probably the same. The air does not move. There isn't a breath of wind, and you've got not only the temperature but the humidity, and it's a dirty kind of humidity, which I think is pretty common in urban areas. It's horribly uncomfortable, horribly uncomfortable.
how
Um,
about how about 88?
88 is just a smidge too low, but Jason Fox and Izzy D nail it with 90.
Wow.
90. And we'll finish off tonight with Reykjavik, Iceland.
What is it again?
Reykjavik.
Oh, Reykjavik, Iceland?
Reykjavik,
Iceland?
Iceland. Yeah.
Oh, all right. Well, I'll bite. Um, I'll 60, 67.
Too high. Jason Schaefer on the gets it. He nailed it. 55.
Double nickels.
Double nickels, the average high temperature at Reykjavik. You have to roll your R's, Joe. Reykjavik.
Yes.
And there you have it. So, I think that pretty well sums up tonight. I
All
bought,
right.
I bought, that was the other good thing about Costco is I love smoked salmon, but if you buy it in the supermarket, it costs you an arm and a leg. And Costco has the double two packs that for $20, and they're you know they're big packs of smoked salmon. So I can eat. My problem is I can eat that in one sitting, and that's not good. But a couple of slices there, very good.
And on that happy note, ladies and
You're not a
gentlemen,
smoked salmon fan?
oh, I love smoked salmon.
Okay, all right. I don't eat bagels, Tom. What's lox? People eat lox, cream cheese and lox on a bagel. I don't eat bagels. I actually don't like bagels.
Okay.
That's me. I like Italian, I like hot Italian bread and a stick of butter and you melt it on it. That's my idea of nirvana. The Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast is brought to you by Tempest by Weatherflow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system. Join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. The link is on the descriptor to this podcast. Use that coupon code, Joe Rayo.
Summer 2024,
And if you do, you will get
10% off.
All right, so we'll see everybody tomorrow night. See if we can get some clarity, maybe a little bit of clarity on what's going to happen with that tropical system over the weekend. And until then, ta ta.
Or reservoir.